Oh, okay. Hey, folks. Still getting adjusted here. I want to have the comments area right behind the lens so that I don't look like I'm looking off into the middle of nowhere. There we go. We got audio, tap, tap, tap. We got video. Video looks halfway decent. Not great, not horrible. I'm kind of leaned back in my chair because I either have the camera too far away or too close with this setup. But I'm also a munchkin. My chair is all the way down. The little tripod for the camera is too short. So the topics for today, we're talking about archery, specifically the fundamentals, things that everybody should know if you're going to do archery. And it doesn't matter whether it's recurve, compound, traditional, non-traditional, Mongolian horsebow. I don't care. Things like spine for the arrows. How stiff is an arrow? Spine is literally the measurement of deflection of the arrow under a given weight at a given length for industry standards. And the companies are pretty good about it. However, they mislead you in the packaging because they'll say it's a 400 spine, and really it's a 392. Or it's a 500, it's a 450. And usually it'll be in the fine print. And the reason I say they mislead you is that when you start getting into it, that's significant. That isn't nothing. And what happens is people buy a bow where they either already own arrows or they're ordering arrows, and they get arrows that are cut and spined with a tip weight that is a little too stiff for their bow. Say you're shooting a 60-pound bow. We'll just go with that. At your draw length, you're 28, just industry standard default length. That is the actual industry norm, for lack of a better term. It's the point at which they do a lot of their measurements is 28 inches. And okay, you've got an arrow that you think is correct. What if it's a little stiff? How are you going to tune that bow? Because your arrow is too stiff for your maxed out bow at your draw length. You can't add to your draw length. That's just you. You can't add poundage, particularly. There's some ways to cheat a little tiny bit on that, but not much, because your bow's already maxed out. You're already at 60 pounds. You could get a 70-pound bow and crank it all the way down, but that's less than ideal too. So what do? You go to a heavier tip weight. Not always easy to do. You do an insert on your arrows. Again, if you've already gotten them and the inserts are glued in, what are you going to do? And the answer really is most people don't even know they have a problem. And I think that's a shame. I think that kind of basic understanding of the sport is important because it all flows together. What kind of arrows should I get? How long should they be? What tip should I use? Changes in fletching affect this. Do I want an arrow wrap or not affects this. Any weight you add to the arrow in the front, in the back, it all changes this math. If you have different kinds of strings, different things on your strings, it can change this. And to me, the real key is a lot of times the shops will say, they'll look at the chart on the back of the arrow box or some quick, cheap software, and they'll go, you got a 60-pound bow, you're shooting at 60 pounds. I'm going to assume you're using 100-pound or 100 grain tips. You need these. And 60-pound bow, you're probably shooting 400s, maybe 340s if you've got a longer draw length. but they missed out on so much of it. They are estimating, and if they estimate wrong because, say, the arrow is stiffer than the advertised default rating, right? It's really a 390, not a 400, or it's a 320, not a 340. And that information is available. I'm not saying like you got to go dig it up. You just can't just look at the front of the box and say, oh yeah, that's that. Every arrow is a little different, every style of arrow. And I wish more people understood it. If you're into archery, learning that relationship of arrow length, arrow spine, arrow weight, poundage of your bow, draw length, because your draw length and your arrow length are not the same. Very often they try to equate the two. Your draw length determines the power stroke. So, for example, I'm a 28-inch draw, and I usually shoot a 60-pound bow. It's not at 60 pounds because it didn't tune to 60 pounds. The arrow is shot best a little under that, and I knew that going in, because getting the arrows that would shoot best at 60 wasn't really doable. I had to give up something that I wasn't willing to give up in terms of the overall setup. So understanding that whole relationship is critical. But your draw length is you. That's you in the bow. That's an amount of power has match up with your draw poundage. Your arrow, other than recurve with a clicker, just to be clear, your arrow can be longer than that. Theoretically, your arrow can be a little shorter than that. You can cheat a little bit, particularly if you've got a rest, you can slide back. My target compound, the rest is pretty far back because of the way it's set up. It's quite the overdraw setup. And it's not, I wasn't specifically going for an overdraw setup. It was just, I have a long rest arm and I shoot a Hoyt, and it actually mounts nicely behind the reflex part of the riser. Sits back there and right up against that. So theoretically, I could shorten my arrows a good 1.5 inch, 2 inches even, behind my theoretical draw length. That would stiffen up the arrows quite a bit. But in my case, I have them long to soften them because I shoot 375s with heavy weights on a lower poundage bow. I'm only shooting like 55, 56 pounds at 28 inches. The way it tunes out with the fatter target arrows, that worked. And understanding that whole sequence is important. And I think that one of the ways to do it is to use one of the applications that does arrow spines. Pinwheel software makes an app for the phone, and they make an app for the computer. The computer one is easier to play around with, but is significantly more expensive. The phone one is basically free unless you want the database. I think it was like $2 or something. And then the database was a little more. The database is updated every year and has all the arrows and bows and all the presets there. If you don't buy the database at all, you have kind of some generic information, but you could use that to understand how this all works together, how it all flows, because you change something and you see what it does. It's got a little meter of spine, and you make the arrow a little longer. You didn't change anything else. You made the arrow a little longer. What does that do? How much does that matter for your measurements? You add a little poundage to the bow. You change tip weight. You change knock weight. You put a wrap and heavier fletching on. What does all this do to your measurements, your adjustments? Because I see a lot of people shooting bows where the measurements they've done, the calculations they've done or not done, are hurting them. And pro shops have to be a little diplomatic. If you come in and you go to a Bass Pro or you go to an actual pro shop, not a big box store, Bass Pros and academies and all that, sometimes you get good people, sometimes you don't. And sometimes they don't have time to be good. And they've got to be diplomatic about it. They've got to juggle, how much time do you have? How much time do I have? How good a shot are you? Are you going to notice the difference between if we really dial this in and if you're not? And you have to be realistic. If you're somebody who can barely hit, pie plate at 20 yards, does dialing all this in really matter? Not really. But if you're somebody who can hit the top of a soda can, say, just for a measurement, a couple inches circle at 20 yards with a recurve, say, yeah, dialing in your arrow spine and your fine tuning of your rest and knocking points and getting all the arrow tuning and bow tuning done just right, that'll matter. If you're somebody shooting a compound and you're a 9 or a 10 shot, like you're not always X-ring, but you're always in the 9s and 10s. Yeah, fine tuning might make it almost always 10s and then more X-rings. And that's the kind of the point where, okay, you have to, take your bow in when the shop can work with you. They have time, or learn to do it yourself, because most of the tuning on modern bows does not require a bow press. If the bow is mechanically set up properly for you, most of the time, what you're then doing doesn't require bow press. It requires serving material so that you can tie in knock points. It requires D-loop material because you're going to probably change your D-loop because you'll screw it up, you'll move it, and then it's tough to retie a D-loop once you've taken it off. It's going to take some ability to adjust your arrow weight, ideally, or the poundage of your bow, up and down. You don't want to be doing this where you're starting out maxed out, and that's not enough. You want it to be, I think these arrows are going to tune. I think my bow is going to set up properly. A couple pounds down from max. If you shoot 70 pounds, you've got a traditional hunting bow at 70 pounds. Plan for 65. Plan for 67. Because that way, if your tune requires 70, you're good. If you plan for 70 and your tune requires 72 or 73, you may have a problem. Maybe your bow can do it, maybe not. But now you're going to need a bow press. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at on that. And John Dudley talks about this a lot. Dave Cousins, I think, has done a video on it, but his was very superficial. He was promoting a product and trying to make it look like information kind of thing. And he wasn't wrong on any of it, but he definitely wasn't going out of his way to share information with his competitors, let's say. Dave is a very shrewd individual, and he's still in the industry competing, whereas John Dudley is not competing. He is coaching and sharing knowledge. And I'm sure some of the guys still competing are like, dude, really? Like these kids coming in are kicking our butts because you're giving them so much information. We had to learn. We had to, learn ourselves, and maybe we shared it with a good buddy, but now it's all out there. Now things that used to be trial by error for like tuning stuff, there's software. The software is good. It will be almost dead on for spine. You will be into fine tuning your particular bow. Other than that, releases. I have my Silverback and my Nock to it. And I mean, obviously you can see they are essentially identical. They work differently, but you use them basically the same way. Their knock points, their attachment points for your D-loop are in the same position relative to your finger. And this one, you hold the safety while you draw, and then you let off the safety when you're at full draw on a compound with let off. Assuming it's adjusted correctly, it will not have instantly fired, assuming you are not pulling too hard. And then you follow through the shot. You pull through the shot, and it releases. And it's a great training tool. I mean, I cannot say enough. If you are having shot inconsistencies and you're like, I've got my anchor point right, I'm on the target, I'm making an otherwise good shot, why is it not working? Something like this, and this is not unique. There's several others on the market. It basically is a Carter Evolution. I believe in Evolution 2 these days, in another coloring and with knock-on name. But something like that makes a big difference. Because you can't hide your errors from yourself. If you get the full draw with that and you let off the safety and it launches, you were pulling too hard. You were too hard on that back wall. If you let off the safety and then you feel like you got to pull like a mofo to get it to go off, you weren't pulling hard enough and your form has broken down. You've crunched that shoulder in. You have relaxed your arm too far. You're not pulling evenly with both arms. The center of your back going both shoulders inward. You're not expanding evenly. Something's different. You're not doing something right because it shouldn't be hard. It should be the same every time, and it should be a few extra pounds of pressure. Just I'm there, boom. And ideally, you practice that way, and then you can go to something like the Nock to it and shoot it the same way. I shoot my Nock to it like this, okay? And when I get here and I pull through, remember, the string doesn't want to move. So this stays, which means my fingers pivot. My hand pivots a little bit. I'm pulling my elbow behind me, right? I'm doing this. What does that do here? If I'm locked in and this pivots, it goes, right? Because it pushes it into my thumb. I'm not pushing with my thumb. I'm not triggering it manually. You can do it. There are guys who do it, and even they will tell you that they're doing it in a way that is less than optimal, but they've built a shot sequence that works for it, and they're using that to their advantage. But it's a crutch they've learned, and it's worse for them to try to unlearn it than to keep going with it. Or they're shooting in weird situations. Because what this lets you do is go, hey, I've got a shot on this deer, and I'm in a weird body position. I cannot make a normal shot, but I am lined up. He's close enough. I'm not worried about it. The shot's going to be good. Push. Hey, I'm in crazy wind. I am having to hold way off. My arm is getting blown around, and I need to, when that wind pauses and I'm on target and it's good, I need to be able to time that shot carefully and squeeze it off. Now, you can argue that you really ought to still pull your sequence, pull through the shot like normal. It's a time and place where that has value, the ability to trigger it manually. However, I've had this for a number of years. I got one of the early ones. This isn't like first gen, but it's one of the, like maybe the third or fourth run they did when they were still doing relatively small runs. And I don't know that I've ever treated it as just a trigger release. I think that I've pretty much always done it the way Dudley says to do it, which is to pull through and let it trigger. And I think the only times I've done it otherwise was testing somebody else's bow where like the draw length was not right for me and I was just trying it out. And I think that's the only time. Otherwise, I always treat it like a back tension release and pull through, which is why I then bought this guy, because this forces you into better form. This tells you when you're screwing it up. And what I was finding is that I was making those errors. Not every time, but I would, I don't shoot for a while. I get back to it. And I was like, you know what? I need something to help me stay on target mentally, focus and get me back on track. Let's see what else we got. Hunting guys. I am sorry to say that like dedicated. Uh, sorry, it's been a long day. Dedicated broadheads for turkeys have been scarce. I've not seen a lot. Um, I have seen mostly the rage hypodermics. Um, the turkey specific ones, they've got the little rippers on the side. I've seen the rage extremes where they've got the fixed blade broadhead and the 2.3-inch expandable. If you are drawing at least like 65 pounds or you have a really long draw length or you're using on my crossbow, those things are wicked. You are getting a massive cut and the cross cut with the fixed blade. So even if something goes horribly wrong and they don't expand, you're still getting a real cut. You're still slicing this thing open. They always expand. Like it's modern expandables are so good compared to 10 years ago even. If you're using enough poundage, which is anything over like 50 pounds, get expandables. The time and place to not use them is a long enough shot where it's marginal. It may not, deploy properly because your energy has dropped. Not enough poundage. That's a biggie. If you're not enough power, if your power level is too low, so really short draw length at higher poundage or normal draw length but lower poundage. Or if you are only going to get a bad shot, you're going to get a rear quartering shot. You're going to get a center on, front or back shot, and you're going to take it. Like if you are aware that that's the shot you're normally going to get, or you just want to have one of those available in your quiver. If you're in a blind or something where you can see that this is what I'm getting, I can switch out. But otherwise, there's an expandable for everybody. There is, if you are middling on power for an expandable, get an 1.5 inch expandable, get an 1 3/8, get an 1 3/4. Get a no collar. They expand more easily. They pop open more easily. Do schwackers where they're being pushed out a little more readily. Get whatever it takes to get you into an expandable. And if you're nervous about them, like if you're old school and you're like, these sucked, this was unreliable. Well, I mean, do you have a target you can shoot broadheads into right now? Try them out. Buy a set of modern expandables, not Chinesium ones. Make sure you don't buy them on eBay. Don't buy them from some weird vendor. Go to a Bass Pro. Go to a Walmart. Go to your local pro shop. Honestly, go to your local pro shop. I would start there and get a set of top quality modern expandables. Honestly, I would just do some Rage. One of the newer Rage designs. I would say the no collars. If you do the 1 3/4 no collars, 2 inches if you've got the poundage for it, and you don't like them, you don't like them. Go back to your fixed blade, power to you. You tried it, right? But if you haven't tried it, you're missing out. They work reliably, and it is a massively faster kill. If you're talking about how far do I have to track it, how ethical a shot is it? Having a mechanical blow through, putting a 2-inch wide cut through that animal, like what's not to like compared to like an 1 1/8, 1 1/4 on some of the larger fixed blades. Yeah, 3 or 4 blades, but your actual cut diameter isn't better. One of the things you got to remember, if your cut diameter is only an 1 1/8, I'm using a Montech as my example. If your cut diameter is an 1 1/8, if you missed by an 1 1/4, or sorry, if you missed by 3/4 of an inch, say, you missed. If you were that far off from a vital, From that blood vessel, you went from the heart, you were a little high, you missed most of the lungs. You missed. If you've got a mechanical that opens up, you're pretty good odds you're going to hit, right? Between those two blades, it actually cuts a bit of a curve. It goes in, and the arrow is still spinning, and it tends to cause like a curving cut. It doesn't go straight through. It doesn't spiral in there, but what you'll see is if you hit like the ribs and you're going between the ribs, it will spiral and you'll actually curly cue your expandable blades, but they will be open. They'll just curly cue like a corkscrew and keep cutting. That's how you know you got good ones, because if you get bad ones, they break. There was a whole run properly heat treated, but it still works. Now, are the blades always going to orient correctly to save you? No. You've got two blades coming out usually, and it is what it is. They make expandables that are 3 blades. I think I've even seen 4 once or twice, but you lose total distance. Your cutting diameter is usually lower because you need more poundage. You're limited. How much power do you have? But odds are good, right? And worst case scenario, you still did a bigger cut. You still missed. You missed all the important stuff, right? But you still did a bigger cut. You cut more blood vessels. You cut more muscle. Maybe you got the spine, these are things where you got to consider it. You got to at least look at it with an open mind. And particularly with the expandables and fixed, I see a lot of guys where they either grew up using mechanicals and are very nervous about the fixed blade or the expandables, or their dad, was like, those suck, they are horrible, don't do it. And they're just getting started and they're like, well, I don't, my dad's my dad. He's been doing this a long time. Your dad's not wrong. Your grandfather is not wrong. Your, uncle is not wrong. Your whoever is not wrong. Your mentor is not wrong. The ones he tried 15 years ago were horrible. They were unreliable. The ones being made now, pretty damn good. Are they always the answer? No. I will definitely say that there is a time and a place for a fixed blade. If somebody's talking to me and we're talking about hog hunting. If you're not using a crossbow, let's go fixed blade. If you're doing honestly elk, moose, bear, and you are not a high poundage guy, you're not doing a 30-inch draw with 70 pounds or something. Yeah, let's talk mechanical, because you really want penetration. You want to make sure that it's going in. And you may be at longer range. You may not be, whitetail deer, 15 yards is not, that's the national average. So you may be, say you're at 25 yards. That's a reasonably long shot for most guys with a compound bow on whitetail. Okay, but now you're looking at an elk down the valley, and you've got a 60-yard shot. And it's clear. There's no trees like blocking your shot. No tree limbs in the way. You can bomb that sucker in. You have practiced out to 100. You are confident. He's not moving. You've got a nice stable shooting position. You're shooting, 70 pounds with a 29-inch draw. Do you want to shoot a fixed blade, or you want to shoot a mechanical in that situation? At that distance, I want the fixed blade, because my arrow is going to have slowed down from air drag, wind resistance. By the time it hits that elk, I don't want to be running a mechanical that I've got to trust to open all the way with the energy I've left. I would rather make sure I penetrated as deeply as possible with what I've got. A blade that is going to be there no matter what. But every situation is different. Hogs, they're just tough little mofos. I mean, they are no joke. And if you hit a shoulder blade or something with a good fixed blade, particularly with the ones that don't have a real fine narrow tip, The G5 Striker 2s now. They got like it isn't a penetrator tip in like the normal sense, but it's a, hey, I got to go through something hard tip. They work great. There are mechanicals that do this. What is it? The Trypan, I believe, where it's like a chisel point and it punches through even like cinder blocks. Because you don't want that needle-like point. The needle-like point just gets bent over. You want something that's like a chisel. It's just like a little, I don't even know what you call it, like an awl. It is going to dig in and let the force of that arrow drive it through. But it's got to be tough enough to do that. So you don't want that fine little narrow point that you might want if you're not worried about that rib. You're not worried about that shoulder blade. A deer's shoulder blade is not nearly the same as a hog, is not nearly the same as an elk. It's a thing. You just got to plan accordingly. If you're doing crossbow, whole different ballgame. If you're not using mechanicals on a crossbow, I can't help you. You've got more power than you know what to do with. Take advantage of it. What else we got on my list here? I mean, people haven't been sticking around, so nobody's asked a question yet. Who's in here? You got somebody in here. Say hi. Ask a question. Call me an idiot. Tell me I'm a genius. Whatever. We're at half an hour, so I at least want to get to 45 minutes before I call it, but I don't want to go on a 15-minute rant about Jussie Smollett. Friggin' idiotic judge letting him out. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think he is a danger to society in like he's going to do something horrible to somebody. But he sure is a danger to society in terms of their morals, ethics, trust, and faith in our system, in victims. Yeah. I guess might as well continue my little rant. He set back. Believe the victim. Trust, let the process work. A decade. He is a high-profile individual who staged a hate crime, committed conspiracy to commit a hate crime because he did it. It wasn't fake. He had it happen. Now, the hate crime was that he was committing the hate crime against other people, not himself. His hate crime was against people that he thinks are so horrible that they would attack him. But they didn't. He attacked them. He attacked their reputation, their honor. He attacked all the people that he's saying are so terrible that he's going to fake the attack to bring attention to it. Because those attacks are so rare in this day and age, in this country, that the fakes outnumber the real ones at this level. I mean, don't get me wrong, just harsh language, abusive attitudes, sure. And is that okay? I don't think so. I think that that's inappropriate. But you're at the level of, hey, you're a jackass, fuck off. You're at the level of, getting a write-up at work. You're getting, kicked out of a club, like not jail time for that, right? But he took it a whole other level and got a pass, basically, because the money doesn't mean anything to him. He's got plenty of money. So he spent a couple days in jail. He spent more time in jail in between parts of the trial than he served for his sentence. I was pissed off when he only had to serve 150 or 155 days of it in the first place. I'm like, what? If I had gone and did what he did, I would be in jail for the rest of my natural life, probably. Hi, I'm a white guy. If I had done the fake, what he, exactly what he did, they would throw the book at me. Oh my God. No. He's a celebrity. He's got money. He's got an image, and he's black. And it drives me nuts to say this, but yeah, that's he is a gay black man. And in this case, the court, the judge, not the original judge, but the one that let him, literally looked at this and went, yeah, let him out. Where is the punishment for what he actually did? What is to stop him from doing it again? Because he doesn't feel like he did anything wrong. He has made it very clear that he feels like he was the victim here. And he is not apologizing. He is not, there's no remorse, right? He is completely, as far as I can tell, crazy, but convinced that he is innocent. I mean, there's always the off chance that he isn't full of it. He's not wrong. That the police and the DA got it wrong. But it smelled from day one. Like, I remember I was in the gym on the treadmill watching the news when the first part of the story broke. And I'm like, really, dude? Really? Because you're saying this happened and you don't look too rough. You look like somebody who faked getting hit. You know, who told them make it look good, but not too good because I'm still an actor and my face needs to look pretty. And it just was, it smelled wrong, you know, like, and as it spiraled, I'm like, you're gonna have to convince me. And I mean, that was what the court was saying. Like, you're saying this is fake. We're saying all the evidence. Sorry, you're saying this is real. All the evidence is saying it's fake. All the evidence says that you hired these guys. You were in touch with them. You told them to do this. You set this up. They didn't come up with this. You did. They're not committing a hate crime. They're contractors. They are literally doing something that you paid them to do. And, you know, I go back to the whole situation with, you know, believe the victim for rape. You have enough cases where it's faked, where it's a lie, where it's manipulating that system to hurt somebody else. And you start having to worry about it. You start looking at it differently, which hurts the people who actually have been victims. You're hurting all the people that you think you're trying to protect in his case. I assume he didn't do this just for the personal PR. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him. Hollywood is Hollywood, right? But even if we're assuming that he did this with higher motives of showing off the horror of this issue, you've hurt that, because now the next gay, lesbian, whatever, you know, trans person that gets attacked, in the back of my head, in the back of millions of people's heads, is it another Jussie? Is it fake or is it real? Rather than assuming that, unless there's something obviously fake about it, that it's real. And working from that basis. And unless something comes up that makes it like, hey, wait a minute, let's reevaluate, did you work from the assumption that they actually were attacked? Instead of what we are going to do now and assume from the get-go that there's that doubt, that kernel of doubt. And I've talked to a bunch of friends. I've got friends who are in the, I don't want to say business, they're in the rape counseling and rape evaluation. Like, did it actually happen? You know, was there sexual assault? Was it just, you know, day after regrets? What was the situation? Like, that's what they're involved in. And we've talked about it. And it is a really horrible thing for the people who really are victims when somebody abuses that system and puts that kernel of doubt. Because, I mean, let's look at the past where they were raked over the coals in court, when They were treated horribly by the justice system and very often didn't come forward because the process was grueling. And it's not great now. Certainly it's still a horrible process, but the system has moved forward to have a little more faith in the claim. It doesn't start with the assumption that you're lying. But now we're going the other way. Now we're going back to, we very often assume you're lying, whether it's in the court of public opinion, whether that is the mind of the officer you're talking to, whether that's the DA. The DA doesn't want to get involved in a case where, oh, you were lying, and now I look like a complete jackass because I started prosecuting this person, and evidence came out that the person that was supposedly the victim that I'm trying to get justice for, yeah, they're the criminal. They're the one. And one of the things we've talked about is that there needs to be reciprocity. If having committed the actual crime, if you have committed rape, if you have committed a homophobic assault, a assault on a minority, or any kind of race-based attack, any racism-oriented, gender-oriented, like any kind of hate-oriented crime, as opposed to I'm robbing you and I don't care who you are, but I'm going to beat you until you give me your money. Anything like that. If you fake it, you should get the same prosecution as if you were the person who had done the crime. Like, it shouldn't be any different. If you lie about it, you should get the same prosecution. You should literally be charged as if you had done that crime. Not because what you did was necessarily so horrible directly, but because what you've done is damage the trust in the system and damage the trust in the community massively. It's one of those things, like, if you are a guy and you've ever had a girlfriend that you break up with, an ex-wife, you're in the middle of a divorce, and they trot out these claims, you're like, what the, like, it wasn't even on the radar. And they bring them out as leverage because now you have to defend yourself, which is distracting you from the rest of the divorce. It's distracting you from moving on from the relationship. All they have to do is throw it out there and just watch you burn. And they get a free pass most of the time. When it's proved that they were lying, very, very rarely are they prosecuted for anything significant. A fine, maybe. If it's part of a divorce proceedings, maybe the judge, if he's, it's absolutely proven they were lying, the judge is a little less favorable toward them. I had a friend who was getting a divorce and went through this, and he's like, oh no, I have absolute proof that she's faking it and lying. And even then, the judge didn't go after her about it. Like, there was no punishment for it. She just didn't get what she was leveraging for. And it harms society. It harms the mesh of society because people stop trusting. People stop associating unless they already know somebody well. People stop believing other people. You start evaluating everything very critically and from a negative standpoint. It's not that you're just thinking critically. It's that you're starting out with the assumption that they're full of it and then seeing if they can convince you, which is very different mentally from starting with a fully open mind or starting from an assumption that this person is not full of it, is not lying, is not maliciously manipulating you. That this is true and accurate information, and or at least as far as that person knows, right? And you're evaluating, did they get good info? Is it correct? Does it fit with other things you know? But that's not what happens after these kind of things. And that's the harm he did. That's the crime that he really committed. And for him to be let out that fast, it's a slap on the face of everybody who has bit their tongue, who has, had somebody accuse them of doing something in order to get leverage, and then just had to swallow it. Just had to, yeah, I didn't do it, and just take whatever comes their way because fighting it wasn't feasible. Um, it's one of those things, like, we don't talk about it enough because talking about it gets you accused of being it. If you say, just as an example, the gay guy got the promotion because he was gay. It was a, I don't even, what is the term? Diversification promotion. Even if it's true, you can't say that, right? Like, you just can't. Not only legally speaking, but just socially, it is not acceptable. Except, what if you were the better person for that job, and you've now watched somebody who's totally incompetent get promoted because of something has nothing to do with the job? What if it was just a straight person, and they're, having a relationship, or at least flirting with their manager? Forget genders. Just, throw whatever combination works for you. There's no crime, except that they got the promotion because the other person likes them more. But what if you were the better fit? Or the guy sits next to you, or the woman who sits next to you, or the dog that sits next to you was the better fit. They didn't get the promotion. When is it socially acceptable to say something about it without getting attacked, without getting canceled? And in my experience, at least so far lately, last decade, it's only okay to say that if the person who got the promotion is male, and usually white. Attacking white men is socially acceptable. And saying, the white guy got the promotion because his white male boss, plays golf with him, is socially acceptable. And if it is true, it's also inappropriate, right? Like, that's, any of that kind of favoritism is inappropriate. But if you say that from any other position, if they're a woman, if they're a minority, if they are anything but straight, you can't say anything, and that hurts the trust. That's my complaint is not that issue. My complaint is that it hurts that trust, because now you're not saying something because you don't want to get canceled. Well, if somebody is faking a crime, do you want to speak up against it, or do you keep your mouth shut? If you don't want to get canceled, you keep your mouth shut, right? If you have evidence that they're faking it, do you come forward? Do you not? What if they're a celebrity? What if, you saying something is going to come back on you, but you want to do the morally right thing? Do you say something? It's a tough situation. And when you hurt that trust in the system, in society, in other people, you harm the whole fabric of society. And this is one of the things that Western society is built on. We are not clan-based. We are not family-based. We are not tribal. Our tribes are a region, a town, a company, a group, like a church group, that kind of thing, where you might have a wide variety of people, but that's our tribe. And you might be in multiple tribes. Like, if your kid is going to gymnastics, say, or is playing, little league or whatever, you may not associate any other place with those other parents and those other kids. But you've got a tribe going for that. Somebody needs some help with something, and they bring it up at the next t-ball practice. They're moving some stuff, and hey, anybody got a pickup truck I can borrow, or can help me move some stuff? Sure. Now, the reason I bring this up is if you're not in the tribe, what's the answer? No. If some random dude from down the block that you don't know, he lives 4 blocks away, you don't know him, sees you in the grocery store pulling up in your pickup truck, hey, can you help me move some stuff this weekend? No. What's your problem, dude? Go rent a U-Haul, right? But the parent at t-ball practice, you don't know them either. You only associate with them here, right? You maybe have a name, but you're part of a group, and that trust is there. But what happens when you don't have that trust? Now, unless you really know them, unless it's a family that your kids are friends, and maybe you go to dinner once in a blue moon, or you also work with the people, or maybe you go to the same church or something, you have mutual friends, now you're going to say no otherwise. And that is the difference between Western society and essentially third world society. If you are in most of Africa, most of the Middle East, if you ask for help and that person is not part of your tribe, and I'm using tribe as group, okay? It's clan, tribe, family, social unit, okay? The term used in a lot of the literature is tribe. And if you're not part of their tribe, screw you, dude. Get out. Go away. Stop bugging me. And they might be a lot ruder, to the point of they may run you off their property violently. So they're going to help their family, their group, no matter what. We saw this in Afghanistan, in Iraq. They will absolutely go to bat for their group, but they don't give a damn about the rest of them. That village over there, fuck them. Don't care. The village 2 valleys over, don't give a shit. Doesn't matter. Doesn't affect me. So trying to build a government was almost impossible. You just had a tribe that was in charge, and all the other tribes are like, why are we listening to that dude? He's not me. He's not one of me. And it doesn't work. It breaks down. And we are literally watching through the behavior of our Congress, through people like Jussie getting released, and us, being told that this is okay. We've seen this in various other cases. We saw this, and I'll go back to it, the Kavanaugh hearings for the Supreme Court. Multiple women lied, and it was later proven that they lied. They were paid to lie. Somebody trying to shut his nomination down paid those women to lie, to make up stories, to exaggerate something. That they had a momentary contact at some point, and then suddenly that turned into a whole thing that nobody else who was there remembers, and you decided to not say anything about it for 30 or 40 years before now's the time, right? Oh, wait, because it didn't happen. They lied, and they never got tried for it. This is literally a high crime. This is not minor. You are lying to subvert the political process for our Supreme Court. Nothing was done. The political organizations ran that whole farce. Nothing was done. But we're supposed to trust that system? I don't trust it. I lost trust in it several nominations ago when I got told that somebody's qualification somebody's best qualification for being on the Supreme Court was that they were a wise Latina. Really? I care more about her law ability. I don't care whether she's a Latina. I don't care if I care if she's wise, but I don't care if she's a woman. I don't care about her ethnicity. I don't care where she's from. I don't care what her name is. I care about her ability. I care about how she's going to vote. Does she match up with me on issues? Yes or no? For the Supreme Court, I want some balance. I don't actually want it to be all my way, and I don't want it to be all the other way. I want it to be fair and honest. They're not there to guide our country. They're there to determine if the things that people want to do to guide our country fit within the framework that sets our country apart. That's their job. I don't need an activist judge on the Supreme Court. We've got enough of them elsewhere, right? But when somebody's primary qualification is not their legal skills, their knowledge, their experience, yeah, I lost trust because that person won their nomination. You couldn't talk about it. You got canceled. If you said anything, the whole media came down and you like a ton of bricks. And honestly, I haven't paid a whole lot of attention, but honestly, she seems to have done fine. I haven't had any like, oh my God, she's a crazy judge. So I don't object to her being on the Supreme Court. I object to the fact that the nomination seemed to center around her gender and ethnicity. Why is that relevant? It's relevant in her advantage, and then it's relevant to Kavanaugh's disadvantage. He's a white male, and they attacked him for being a white male. Really? Like, you couldn't find a court case that he ruled on that was like attackable? Come on. His whole career, there was nothing that like he ruled one way and it turned out later that there was information that would have exonerated somebody or something. Like, come on. All this stuff, it erodes the fabric of a country. And unless we want to look like Afghanistan, where it's a whole bunch of little tribal units and they don't care about each other and they don't work together. Yeah. One analogy I've seen is if you are putting a barn up in a country town, a farming community, half the town is going to be there for the barn raising, right? It's a party. They're not all your family. You might not even like a third of them. You might not even like half of them, unless you are somebody that the whole town hates. And even then, they might show up for the party. They just won't talk to you. Like, screw him. I'm just here for the beer and barbecue. But your barn goes up. If you're the Amish, the barn goes up. You can ask your neighbor for help. You have to really hate your neighbor as a farmer, as an Amish farmer in particular, before you don't ask for help and get it. If we devolve into these tribal units, the only way you get help is if they're part of your tribe. And tribes get smaller and smaller. When you have that situation, it shrinks. It becomes more and more smaller units because first you were working with this larger group, but then this group that has more close ties splits off because they don't like so-and-so, but you like so-and-so because he's part of your smaller group. Could be families, like maybe there was multiple families. You started out as a small town. And then there was some people are with this family, some people are with that family. Say there was like the mayor and the judge or the mayor and the sheriff or something. They're like the center pieces. Next thing you know, you're 20 families and people associated. And then you're down to 30, 40 in a town of 5,000. Now you're in all small groups, right? By the time you figure, kids, elderly, you're in small groups. and you're not helping each other. You're not working together. You're not getting that barn up, because 10 people take an awful long time to put a barn up, right? 20 people takes a long time to get that barn up. 200 people, that barn goes up in an afternoon. You bang out a side and you can walk that sucker up because you got 20 or 30 guys on one side and you got a bunch of guys with ropes on the other side. Boom, whole side of your barn goes up. Done. Goes right in the holes you dug, and you had guys tag team in the hole digging instead of it being an all-day project for a couple holes. It was, yeah, we got them done while the other group was hammering the side together. Teamwork gets these things done. We didn't build the Hoover Dam as a small tribe. It takes massive numbers of people working together. It's the difference between Western society and tribalism that much of the rest of the world has been oriented around. And you'll see it as the tipping point of nationhood, as opposed to there's a nation, but it doesn't get along. Different tribal groups inside the nation are always fighting. And we're devolving to tribalism. And the media is making it worse. The politicians are making it worse. They're not making it better. They talk about healing, and they do things that are the exact opposite. They do things to make it more polarized and smaller groups. And what you'll notice is they break people up into smaller and smaller groups, and it's a manipulation tactic. I don't know if I've talked about this in video before, but it's a manipulation tactic. And it's a classic one, because if you can split people up so that they feel like they're part of this little group here and they're against this little group here, and against this little group here, and maybe they're okay with this little group here, you can do something to this little group or this little group or this little group or this little group, and none of the other ones will help them. None of the other ones get too upset. And then you do something to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and then keep. As long as you don't do something to 4 or 5 of them at one time, as long as you don't do it to a big group of them at one time, you can do a lot. You can pick away at their freedoms, at their options, at their qualities of life drastically, because they're not strong enough to fight back. They may want to, they may try, but they fail because as an organization, as a government, as a system, you've split them up into small groups that are manageable, where they can't resist. They can't fight back effectively, financially, vote-wise, whatever it is. But you couldn't take on 3 or 4 of them at once and win. That's enough leverage to, the press would look bad enough, the optics don't look good, the voting doesn't work. They can outvote your group. But as long as you keep it to these little groups that they've broken people into, you can pull it off. And it's why tribalism doesn't work, because there's always a tribe playing off the other tribes. They want access to some resource, and different tribes got access. They've got control of it. You play it up as, that tribe they don't give you free access, and they're horrible, and remember how they raided so and so, and they're lording it over us because they've got that resource, and blah 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 blah, whatever it is, right? They're just, whatever you have to use to make several other groups hate that group that you need to either be removed or to come to the negotiating table from a position of weakness. You get 3 or 4 other groups involved, suddenly that other group isn't so dangerous, is it? Whether it's politically, socially, militarily. That's why you form coalitions, right? Well, socially, we are breaking down our coalitions. We are being broken down into the smallest subunits they can. And they're doing it by breaking the trust in systems. Anyway, I've ranted about this enough. Yes, I have a degree in that kind of stuff. That is actually what my degree is in. Not the political side, but the manipulating people, the breaking them down into groups for advertising purposes, for PR purposes, not so much social manipulation of a political nature, but as a sales nature. And I think it's just as unethical that way, which is why I don't do it. I got the degree and went a completely different direction because it was just too slimy. By the time I got far enough in and understood it, I was too late. I might as well finish the degree. But anyway, to whoever just came in, I apologize. You literally came in as I'm finishing up. So unless you have a question, oh, you left. I was going to say, unless he had a question, or she, or it, could have been somebody's dog. I am tired. I'm going to call it a night. So I can see my screen. Good night, all. Take care. Stay safe. Stay out of trouble. And don't let them split you up into little tribes. Make friends with people of all types. Get to know everybody. Most people are pretty damn good. You know, there's always the fringe wackos. But there's fringe wackos in like every direction. Left, right, center, up, down, sideways. Like, they're just fringe wackos. Screw it. Everybody else? So you disagree on this. Maybe you like the same beer. Maybe you like the same whiskey. Maybe you like the same food. You don't have to like everything. You don't have to share everything. There's somebody good to go have a beer with and talk about football. I don't want to talk about football. Talk about football with them. I want to talk about guns with you, over some whiskeys. So your beer and football night, that's that guy. Who cares what his politics are? Anyway, ciao.